For this video, we are going to work on comparing decimals. When we compare decimals, place value is the most important part to help us figure out which one is greater, which one is less than. After we compare some decimals, then we are going to order some as well, meaning we're going to be comparing multiple decimals to put them in order from least to greatest, using, again, their place value. So place value will be key. When we look at the first example, both of our numbers have 12 to the left of our decimal. That matches. So in that sense, they are the same. The farther we go to the left, the bigger that place value has an effect on the value of the number. So in the tens place, when they match, we know that at that point they're the same. Then we check the ones place, again they match. At the decimal, we know we're lining everything up. So then the next place value we look at is a 2 and a 3. Because everything has matched up until that point, we're comparing a 2 and a 3. We know that 2 is smaller or less than 3, so we would use the less than symbol to compare. Another helpful tip is when we look at this fraction, we have 2 digits after the decimal. We only have 1 here, so we're going to add a 0 to fill in that place. Adding a 0 at the very, very end to the right of the decimal doesn't add any additional value. It just allows us to compare based on 23 and 30. Well, 23 is less than 30, so 12 and 23 hundredths is less than 12 and 3 tenths. We can use that same strategy for the next one. In the hundreds place, they both have a 1. In the tens place, they both have a 0. In the ones place, they both have a 5. Then it's the decimal. In the tenths place, they both are 6s. And then in the hundredths place, we see a difference. One of them is a 2, one of them is a 0. 2 is greater than 0, so 62 or 620 is going to be greater than 60 or 602. Because the 2 is greater than the 0 and they are in the same place value, our first one's going to be greater. We can also look at 620 in comparison to 602. They have the same number of digits now that we added the 0, and then we can compare them. We always want to double check to the left first because that's going to make a bigger difference. Both start with 98,000, so that matches. Then they both have 765. That matches as well. So it's the decimal portion of these numbers that's going to make the difference. The tens place in both is a 0. The hundredths place in both is a 1. Then in the thousands place, that's where they differ. So that's the place value that's going to determine what symbol we use to compare. Because 1 thousandths is bigger than 0, we know that 1 is greater. Again, falling back on our strategy, this one has 4 digits to the right of the decimal, so we want 4 here as well. So if we add a 0 and then read the number excluding the decimal, 110 is greater than 101, so we would use the greater than symbol. That may be helpful to write down. Greater than symbol and then less than is right here. Let's give this next one a try. Both of them have no whole number values, so that matches. The tens place is a 0. The hundredths place in both is a 5, so they still match. The thousands place is where they differ. Always starting from left to right. So then when we look at this, 560 in comparison to 559. 60 is greater than the 59, so we would use the greater than symbol, just like the 6 in the thousands place is bigger than the 5 in the thousands place. So this is greater. The final one for just comparing, we want to do the same thing. Even though this looks like 27, you'll notice that the first digit, tenths, hundredths, thousands, 10 thousandths, and again, tenths, hundredths, thousands, 10 thousandths, They're both in the 10,000ths place. So that's the place value that's going to determine it. This may look like 27, but it's got 5 digits to the right of the decimal. This looks like 6, but really it's 60 because we need 5 digits to the right of the decimal as well. So that matches. So then when we compare, we're comparing 27 and 60, comparing the 10,000ths and the 100,000ths place values. And so we would use the less than symbol. Reading it from left to right, 27 100,000ths is less than 60 100,000ths or just 6 10,000ths. So that's how we compare when we just have 2 decimals. When we have multiple decimals, though, we're going to order them from least to greatest, meaning we want to find the one that has the smallest and put that first, still using our comparison symbols. So when we look at this one, each of our numbers start with 7 in the ones place, our biggest place value for these digits. Then each one has a 0. Again, all matching. In the tens place. If we look in the hundreds place, however, that's where all 3 of them differ. 0 is smaller than the 1 in the hundreds place, which is also smaller than the 8 in the hundreds place. So when we order them, we want to start with the smallest number. The 0 is the smallest. The 8 is the biggest, meaning this 1 that's just in between. So when we look at them, if we wanted all 4 of those numbers to have, all 3 of these numbers to have 4 digits, we could add digits as well. And then we're comparing 63 to 110 and 800. That may also be helpful, writing any of the digits after we're past those zeros. We know that 63 is the smallest, so that's the first full number that we write, using the less than symbol, followed by our middle number, 7 and 1100s. We don't need to write that 0, but we could. It's still the same value, which is less than our greatest value, the 800. So we have 7 and 80 thousandths as our greatest one. Let's look at the next example as well. Again, all of our numbers start with 12 as our whole number. So at this point, they all match. Their tens place digit, 2 of them are zeros, and the third one is 5. So we know right now that 5 is bigger than both 0 and the other 0. So this one is the biggest. We have our largest or our greatest valued number. That one's going to go last. Now we need to compare these two. When we compare them, 5 in the hundredths place and 6 in the hundredths place. That's where they differ again. 5 is smaller than the 6, so that makes this the smallest number. Again, you could look at everything after the decimal, 0, 5, 6, so really 56. 0, 6, 5, so really 65, and 560. This time we have to keep that 0 because it's at the end. It's to the very, very right, so it's adding additional value. Very different 56 in comparison to 560, whereas if we get rid of the zeros, it's still 65 and still 56. So we can use that to order. We know this one's the smallest, so we would say 12 and 56 thousandths is less than our middle number, 12 and 65 thousandths, which is less than 12 and 560 thousandths, or excuse me, still thousandths, or 56 hundredths. And this would be the answer. So again, when we are either comparing or ordering decimals, we always want to use their place values. A helpful tip is to make sure that we have the same number of digits to the right of the decimal. That will help us compare them a little bit easier. It's also helpful to mark up those place values so that it's easier for our eyes to follow along, to order them or compare them using our comparison symbols both times.